So we'll start with a little anecdote that somebody told me recently in London. There's a company called Mind Candy. They're a London-based company. They create this online world called Moshi Monsters, which has spawned into a massive franchise where they create TV shows and cartoons and toys, and it's turned into a huge company. One thing they experimented with was when they first ran their first TV campaign, once they got to that scale, they just noticed their CPA just plummeted. It went so low that they decided to experiment with turning all their highly targeted, and they're a very digital savvy company. They were doing sophisticated stuff with retargeting and display and search. Once they turned off all their digital activity, their CPA came down even lower. So we're here to talk about data and video. Why are we talking about data? What has data got to offer the video world that, has TV been succeeding in the past, or is this something, how is it going to enhance the TV proposition?
Sure, I take it you're looking at me.
Yes, very much so.
So I think data has to offer TV everything that it offers digital. I mean, we're really seeing the world of TV change. We have the ability to deal with addressable TV now through certain aspects, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be planning for delivery of ads into the linear space with the same evolution process, but faster than what we did on the digital side. Is
there a tension though between that thing of getting that mass reach that TV has traditionally offered and data driven? Is there a tension there, or is it?
Well, I don't think we need to decide between mass reach and highly targeted. We should have the ability to do both.
Yeah. Rich, what are you seeing in terms of the clients? Is there a hunger on the client side to use data for brand campaigns?
Well, I think the question is which data?
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of different data that can be used. The promise that digital has always held is that you can be much more individualistic with targeting, right? And so those are some of the things that we're seeing as we make the transition from banners into video and TV, is applying some of those same more unique user-related profiling, although profiling has its own challenges from a word. But using data, using insights to be more specific and more targeted to make sure that the ad is as relevant as possible for the consumer. That's the promise. That's what data can bring. That's what it's done in digital. And that's the things that we look for. What data sets are unique, what's interesting, what's valuable, how individualistic can we get? Let's move away from segments. Let's move more to individual profiles, more composite understandings of users, and applying that to everything that we do, not just in digital, but into TV, into radio, into out of home, into everything.
Is this something is it a fit for all brands? I mean, there's a guy, Richard Brook, he's director of media for Unilever. I'm not sure whether it's in Europe or globally, but he often says, to him there's no such thing as a wasted impression, where, he gave the example of Dove, where they were showing Dove ads to men for all these years, and I'm sure any man in this audience can say, yeah, Dove stands for, this amount of integrity, and they respect people and all the rest of it. And then when it came to launching their Dove range for men, it was just, the men got it straight away. They said, and in the interim, he said, that there were men going to the supermarkets, picking up moisturizer for their wife, getting the one they recognized off the TV, and she was maybe switching brands. Is it something that's a good fit for all brands, or is it a certain type of brand?
Well, I think that has to go with managing your marketing mix and managing what you're doing from a tactic perspective within the funnel. Those tactics that were used to reach men broadly before Dove had a Dove Men line, those were higher funnel activities that were more designed for broader reach. So they met the KPIs that they were looking for. As you get farther into the funnel and get to more specific objectives and more specific purchase behavior, there are more specific, and those campaigns were less effective down there, which is where programmatic has been successful in filling in some of those gaps, because it is more relevant at the time of purchase decisioning.
I think that you're looking at data somewhat unilaterally there, because while there's data that's available for targeting and pinpointing the consumer, there's a lot of additional data that's becoming available in TV from the feedback mechanism, right? So data about what's happening with the content and what's happening with the viewer behavior. So the marriage between what's available through content and then what's available with the viewership is very powerful.
We get on the tech level, I think one of the things that came up recently, we did a piece about how 51% of video is currently served into 300 by 250 MPUs, and one of the sort of surprised me was that a lot of the buying platforms aren't even able to tell you what size player you're targeting your ad into, which just seems incredibly primitive in this day and age. Are we getting the basics right, that you know what size player you're targeting?
I mean, my opinion is going to be informed by digital video, not TV. And I think, our use of data within digital video is pretty shocking. I think we can target audiences, we can target sort of users, and we try and focus on that. But actually target in content, target in player size, target in viewability, target in geo, target in all those basic things that actually should be done before we then, get into the multiple layers of other targeting. We're just doing a dreadful job at that as an industry. And I think there's a lack of standardization. There's a lack of, general approach to it. And I think, therefore we can, when we talk about dropping a pixel for retargeting, or we talk about, walled gardens, and, so the conversation tends to be around controlled environments in an uncontrolled world. And, in an uncontrolled world, we're doing a pretty poor job at actually getting rich data sources that we can really use to allow every publisher to benefit from the technology that's being created. I know a lot of publishers who would argue that actually the data that they collect and the data that they then pass on doesn't actually result in higher CPMs, doesn't result in higher revenues, doesn't actually mean anything to them, but they just feel that they have to gather this data in order to play in the game. And at some point, all of this tech has to somehow translate to return on investment. And I don't know whether we're doing a great job of that.
I mean, it was interesting, Denise, somebody like you from an ad tech background going over to NBC. What's the prize for them? I mean, I know in the UK we've the likes of Sky, where they've introduced their data-driven advertising, and for them it's very much about incremental revenue, where they see the opportunity is local, attracting new budgets from, say, SMEs, like a car dealership that's regional, that all of a sudden TV's worthwhile to them because they no longer have to target nationally. Or monetizing daytime inventory that wasn't really being measured properly and wasn't really of much value before. Is that, where does the incremental revenue, why have you been hired? What's your mission?
Sure. My mission is really to help understand and put into action how data can make advertising more powerful across all the mediums. So we have products that span our data platform that go across all of the different channels. So we have ATP, which is what we work on with linear. We have NBCUX, which is our programmatic capabilities. NBCU Plus, which is our addressable capabilities, and then Social Sync, which helps with social. And really what we're looking at is how to bring all of those together to help our advertisers reach their audiences at scale. So what our main goal is with all of our data efforts is really to increase the efficacy of our advertisers' campaigns.
When it comes to, I mean, is the collaborative approach, I mean, one thing that often comes when people are on stage at these things, it's often, yes, we're all about helping the other side, but then in reality there's often a bit of a trust issue when it comes to data. Sometimes, in terms of, what's your feeling on that, Rich? Do you feel that supply side trusts you with their data, or?
Well, I think it's, I think there are a couple of factors involved. One is the type of data you're talking about.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about audience profiles, there are some areas of concern and trust, and brands that have been working together. NBC has been working with clients of ours for 50 years. There isn't as much of a trust issue with that. For newer relationships, it takes time to build up that trust. We're in an industry where 6 years ago it was not uncommon for people to steal data and reuse it in other ways. There were entire businesses that were built successfully off of repurposing data assets from other people, and we learned from that, and we use those same technical capabilities. We use the same data sets. With the strategy and the approach is obviously very different now. But that from an audience profile perspective, there is some, I can understand the legacy concerns. We're in a different place now than we were back then. So that has improved. But then there's other insights as well that we can be working together on. So understanding more granularly where the ad is running, getting greater transparency on the URL, the placement, the viewability, all of these other factors, that's a two-way street. In order to make the commitment from the publisher side for those assets, there has to be a commitment of insight and understanding of what the objectives are from the buyer. And it has to be a two-way street. Programmatic is the how it executes, But it is not a set it up in a vacuum and forget about it.
Are you willing to pay a premium when you get data from a publisher? Is that?
So the data, if the data is premium and worthwhile and proves out to be worthwhile, it is absolutely worth what it's paying for. The goal for us is not necessarily about minimizing spend; it's about improving performance, right? We will pay for what's valuable. We need to work together on understanding what that value is, so that no one feels like they're getting taken advantage of in that transaction.
I mean, I think, Denise, NBC is probably in an exceptionally strong position data-wise with the Comcast relationship, and you've got lots of other things going on. But the average publisher doesn't have that massive infrastructure and resource. Do independent publishers, what are their options when it comes to bumping up the value of their inventory when it comes to data?
Sure. When you're looking at the TV space, I would definitely say that there are a lot less options than what I was used to coming from the ad tech side. But there are a lot of options available, especially when you look at the likes of RentTrack and Fourth Wall. But to Rich's point, I think there's definitely a stronger trust and relationship-centric approach to data when it comes to linear versus what we've seen in digital. The agencies, all of the calls we have are very much about partnership and how do we use all of these learnings that we have from digital and bring them over to TV and make it more powerful. That certainly wasn't the way, for the past 15 years on the digital side.
Yeah. Irfan, what's your feeling on the publisher situation? I mean, do you feel that, if I'm a small independent publisher, should I really be positioning myself, particularly with something like video, as a data-driven offering, or should the position be more focused on your premium content?
I think the lack of trust in the digital video space means that you've got to label your inventory correctly, and therefore you've got to have the very basics and basic data that's there that is real and genuine. You've then got to work with technology partners that can create that sort of taxonomy and that system that will transfer that data in a trusted way through to a buyer. You can't enter the market now. I mean, some people still do, but you can't really be in the market, offering to sell apples, and then when you leave the store, you find you bought some chocolate. That's just, and then you have to go back and get a refund, and it is really as bad as that. The challenge, as I say, is the lack of standardization. So you can use multiple third-party vendors to verify whether you've bought an apple or not. One of them will say you bought an apple. The other one said, well, I think it's an apple, but I'm not quite sure. And then from the buy side, they'll have a different version of what it is that you've got. But I mean, the reality is that if you really want to play in the sort of programmatic space, especially in any exchanges, you've got to label your stuff correctly, and I think that there's a real role to play for ad tech to do a far better job at creating the plumbing, the infrastructure to enable publishers to label correctly and allow the buyer to have a dynamic view on that correctly labeled inventory. Because without that, there's no trust at all.
Well, things with video, well known for having a massive sort of chronic shortage of premium supply. Does that sort of reduce the incentive to move forward with data strategies and that kind of thing? Would you experience are you generally being offered data with premium inventory, or are you just typically buying the premium content in context?
Being offered and using it are two different things. So we use some syndicated data, we use CRM data, et cetera, for some of it to make sure that it's as optimal as possible. The challenge that we have with inventory is it is scarce. And video is a scarcer market, which is why we're seeing players who have the native in-content units really starting to take off, because it is an extension play. It isn't the same experience as capturing a video as pre-roll, but it is still an in-content experience, which has value, different value, but still has value, and we're still working through a lot of that. But I think that fundamentally, we want more. Which is why we're excited about TV.
I don't see. I think there's a lot of inventory out there. As I say, the issue is that it's mislabeled, and what's valuable video inventory. Valuable video inventory is inventory that you understand, and then you can make your own decision on the value of it. If you know what it is, then it could be a $2 CPM, it could be a $50 CPM. But if it's not correctly labeled, you can't make that choice and make that informed decision. Some brands, that we work with globally, happy to pay a low price for something that's correctly labeled, which wouldn't be usually termed as as premium inventory. But to me, it's about correct labeling of what you're selling, and whether that's, every industry is the same, isn't it, on that regard? If you're going to sell something, at least know what you're selling.
Yeah, but to the supply challenge, it's actually why we're starting to see greater convergence, which is why TV is accelerating so quickly. I mean, Brian's presentation on all the different ways that you can buy a video ad, that is absolutely our future. It's a matter of the device. It's less about a TV versus a phone, but it's fundamentally about getting a video played, getting into the video experience, and making it feel like it is naturally part of that experience.
What's driving the shortage of supply, though? I mean, it seems odd that we've got a situation where there's huge demand, people literally waiting with their money to spend, and yet publishers don't seem to be producing it. Or is it a question of there isn't enough web properties that are really properly set up for video? What's the problem with what's happening on the supply side? Why is the supply side failing to meet the demand?
I don't know that we're necessarily failing. I think, for one, it's a much more complicated ecosystem than what we're used to in tech, right? Where you can create additional ad slots and put up a player and off you go. So the producers here are not necessarily owning the properties where content would most likely be viewed, right? So there's a lot of complications around how you choose your channels, and then how does that work from a technical perspective? How does it work from an economic perspective? And then also there's value in scarcity, right? Premium content is that, and we have to manage it accordingly. So I just think that there has to be a lot more thought given than what the industry is used to. And when you're looking at the programmatic access to this kind of inventory, not all of the outlets are set up for it just yet. So I think there's issues or complications on both sides that are yet to be worked out.
I mean, one of the sort of commonly cited concerns on the sell side about the move to data-driven advertising is that buyers will want to cherry-pick impressions and just take these little slivers of inventory that they want. Obviously, Brian touched on how the upfront model. The upfront isn't just about doing big deals, but it's also about funding the next year's production and having that cash banked. Is data-driven advertising? It will always be an add-on to the upfront model, or will it be something that we could ultimately see Super Bowl ads traded in real time?
Well, I think real time and data are two separate things, right? You can have data-driven advertising that is not real time, and I agree with the point earlier from Brian that I don't believe that we're going to see an auction, for these Super Bowl ads, just given the cost of development and also the risk that's inherent in that kind of environment. But that doesn't mean it can't be data-driven, especially when you get to the ability to view certain kinds of content through addressable TV, right? There's no reason why that person can't have a more relevant ad experience and yet not have it traded via an auction. Should that experience be operationalized programmatically? If we're talking about programmatic from an operations and workflow perspective, absolutely. We need to make it more automated. I mean, it was amazing to me when I came over to TV to see how manual so much of it still is, right? But I think we need to separate the auction, the different streams of programmatic, whether it's auction or operationalizing something, right? And then data is a separate element that can be layered on top of both of those.
Irfan, you were telling me before at the break about how you sort of thought the future probably might be open auctions as the infrastructure improves, and you think we weren't necessarily talking about TV, it should be said.
Yeah, no, I mean, it amazes me how many people are involved in programmatic video, and the processing of it and the operations of it, and you just change your head count from a certain skill set to another skill set. And I don't think it's delivering the efficiency and the value that it's set out to deliver. So, and then what happens is that if the tech isn't right, we sort of, relabel or rebadge it to something which is a more efficient way maybe of sending a fax, but it's still an insertion order with a bit of information that actually the sales team used to know anyway about their audience and about their publisher, and now they've just wrapped it up and they've processed it over over a programmatic interface. So I don't think really it's delivering the dream that that it set out to. So at some stage, but it's a nascent industry, and the systems, the tech is old. You know, so the exchanges are a number of years old, and you know, maybe not designed to do what we want it to do. So I think that it's going to evolve, but I do believe that I'm still a believer that the efficiency of programmatic is going to be in the real-time auctioning and buying and an algorithmic-based trading, and somehow we have to build the trust though before that dream can happen.
Rich, are you living the programmatic dream, or are you
I don't have dreams.
just a bigger, more expensive headcount?
Well, part of the challenge that I think specifically with video is it was approached basically as an integration point between two existing streams. So you had the promise of what digital banners were doing in terms of being really specific, and then the dollars of TV. And so you're getting the benefits of those, but we treated it as this odd Frankenstein of those pieces. And we still have a lot of work to do to untangle it. We're making, you know, we're being more careful about it as we approach social as a channel. We're being extremely more careful about it as we look at TV, because it's really not that different. We need to figure out how they become more synonymous with each other, how they are fully integrated. You know, if 70% of an audience watching a TV show is going to be on a device that is not a traditional TV, it's not going through a cable provider, we have to figure out how that's going to work. It can't just be this, well, we're going to apply display's approach to it. We can't just apply TV's approach. We have to come up with a new, unique way of dealing with it. And we're still in the very early stages of doing that.
And just, I know this has come up a couple of times today, but the creative challenge with video, obviously these usually TV ads are just being thrown online, and there's no level of customization. They're often, you're putting 30-second ads against 2-minute content, which just drives users insane. Where are the creative agencies on this when it comes to video? Is the cost factor, or is it a technology issue where it'd be simply a question of, you know, maybe coming up with a sort of dynamic video solution?
Well, I think part of it is a creative challenge. Part of it is a cost, right? It is expensive to film things. That technology still costs something. You have to pay people to be in those ads, whether it's actors or it's graphic design. There is still a cost of that creation. And so reusing assets makes a lot of sense. There could be a lot of work done to improve how that works, and so that it feels more organic to the medium. But fundamentally, we still have those cost challenges. And that cost challenge is the same reason why no one talks about programmatic radio. Programmatic radio is just as easy to execute as TV and video are, but the cost of creating radio is just as expensive at lower prices. So it is significantly more challenging to execute.
But is there no willingness, though, to create shorter ads? 15-second ads. Where does the fault lie? You know, is it a sell-side issue? Is it a creative agency issue?
Well, the question is what message can you contribute in less than 15 seconds?
Yeah.
In a video experience.
I mean,
I've been making jokes for years with the DVR that someone should just make an ad that's just like a Coke bottle for 30 seconds, and that's all you see as you fast forward through it. But like, that's not really an effective ad for someone who actually sits and watches it. So fundamentally, we still have a challenge there in terms of telling a compelling story and not just taking up space in the consumer's experience.
Yeah.
I just don't think we've got the tech there that knows when to tell the story, though. You know, so
I think we definitely still have a challenge there.
You know, and that's the bit. So we sometimes tell a story at an inappropriate time when you're just in the way of trying to watch something which is, as I say, 15 seconds long, and you've got a 30-second pre-roll. I think, you know, tech can do a lot better at that.
So when it comes to moving on back to TV, obviously, a big story last week was Dish and iPad Web launching their impression level targeting. Do you see any insight into how this is going to work in terms of, you know, TV is typically a shared experience, with different people in the room, and then, you know, when we're moving on to individual devices as an individual experience, how is the TV world going to sort of differentiate between those different people across screens?
Sure. Well, I think right now there's a lot of limitations in terms of what level of data is available, at what level of aggregation. Obviously, as we get more towards a digital type delivery, we'll be able to get down to individual devices. But when you're looking at true linear and cable delivery, obviously we're still at a household level.
Rich, have you been involved in any of the early experiments with the more advanced side of the TV industry?
We have. We have. Still, I would say, in the very experimental stage. The challenge is understanding the audiences you're reaching. To Denise's point, we're still very early on.
I mean, what's the key attraction of data-driven TV advertising? Is it the frequency capping? Is it the sequential storytelling? Or is any of this actually happening?
I mean, it's all the promise of what data does. I mean,
I think it's all of that. I think the ability to do sequential storytelling throughout the day on different devices, I think it's creating that emotional connection with the audience that television has done such a good job of through the years. It's all of those things, plus what we've done in digital. But a lot of it is hardware constraints and technology constraints. So it's early days. If you look at the different technologies that are available for online ad delivery and decisioning and targeting compared to what's available for television, there's no comparison. I mean, there's so much available for digital and so little, to the point that, having come into this role and looking for vendors, there's times when I maybe have a choice of one or two, and then the question becomes, do you build, do you buy, do you rent? We're not rich for choice in television, and I'm hoping to see that change over time. We're seeing a lot of the ad tech, the digital ad tech folks try to morph into that, but many of them are coming from a very direct response type experience, and that's so different than what we're used to in TV, that I think there's an incredible learning curve and adjustments that need to be made to the technology in order for it to be truly relevant. Yeah,
I think it's very interesting what you said about the ad tech companies. I think often thinking it's just a question of showing up with your technology, but there's a different power dynamic going on in the TV industry. And do you think the pay TV operators, a lot of people in the TV industry, and not just the pay TV operators themselves, feel that they're the people who will ultimately own programmatic TV? And if you look at some of the early movers, Dish, Cablevision here are doing incredible stuff. Sky AdSmart are doing incredible work in the UK. Is there room, particularly on the sell side, for ad tech companies, people in this room, to move into programmatic TV, or is it locked down, that control?
I think there's absolutely room. I think there's plenty of room. There's so much that we're trying to do, whether it's to your point earlier, creating different kinds of dynamic creative. I think there's the data opportunity. There's workflow, automation, inventory. There are so many different areas that are relatively untouched at this point by technology vendors from the digital space, that I definitely think there is room. But I beg of the vendors to come at it from more of a television approach than a direct response approach, and to use the vocabulary accordingly, because fundamentally these groups, there's a large wall in between, and the terminology is different, and it's very hard to communicate across. That's something that's been very clear since my time at NBC started.
Yeah, I mean, from my side, what I'm seeing is a lot of companies trying to become generalists across programmatic, and I think it's wrong when you're in a nascent industry to become a generalist, and again, just to, I can do display, I can do TV, we can do video, we can do native, we can do mobile, all different issues, and I think that we just haven't nailed. Forget display, I don't know that much about that, to be honest, but on the video side, certainly, there's a lot to work to be done there, and to figure things out, and then the language of scheduling and all the other stuff that TV have, it's a whole, it seems to be a whole different ball game.
Just to sort of touch on the sort of dystopian mindset that's starting to kick into the industry, that the industry's screwed and ad blocking is going to do us all in. When it comes to video, the most interesting publisher I've gone into was Vice, where they said the pre-roll and display advertising, and they have their own ad network. It pays for the day-to-day, but the really big money, where they were making money was video content, creating branded content for publishers, which they were integrating then within their own channels and distributing online. Yeah, in your opinion, is that something that broadcasters should be looking at more, or is there a content marketing play at NBC?
When you say content marketing, are you talking about distribution per se?
Branded content, creating and distributing.
We've always done that.
Yeah.
So I think there is an opportunity there. I think there's opportunity to look at some of the content or similar content to what we have and looking at the different channels. I mean, we've obviously just made 2 investments on the digital side with Fox and BuzzFeed, so we're looking at what's happening there. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity, and I think the broadcasters in general just have to grow with society and the changing way that we take on media.
And at the agency level, what are you seeing in terms? Are you seeing a sort of strategic, maybe discussions about shifting more in directions that seem a little bit safer, away from ad blocking, these privacy issues, and
So branded content is a valuable part of the marketing puzzle. It always has been. There's no reason for it to change. There's more reason for people to use more of it. But to my point earlier, it is an expensive cost to create that any content creation, no matter where you're using it, is an expensive cost, and that has to be factored in. It is a part of the puzzle. We can't only be doing these things. I was reading an article, and people were talking about branded content as being the only future, just like native being the only future. That's exciting if that's all you do, but that's not the world we live in, and it's not the world we're going to be living in for the next few years, at least. So it's a valuable part of the puzzle, and we will continue to invest in creating content and partnering with publishers who will do branded content for us using their editorial expertise. That's not going to change.
Yeah. I just realized we're out of time. Guys, give me a round of applause for my wonderful panelists. Cheers.